Hello and welcome to Doubles and Trebles. We're here to talk darts. We're here to talk the Masters 2021. The first TV tournament of the darting year is in the bag. Jonny Clayton was the bit of an outsider. Well, a lot of an outsider, and he's made it to the final against Mervyn King, who these two fellas on screen are obviously going to be talking about. We've had Ozzy Smith on as a special guest. He says that Mervyn King's going to be his bet for the tournament. He makes it to the final at 50-1. So we've got to have him back then, haven't we, Ozzy Smith? I mean, in one half an hour stint, he's made man betting look absolutely pitiful compared to that. So Ozzy's back again to give us some more of his betting insight and darting knowledge. We're going to have a bit of any other business section at the end. There's bits of news has come out about the season ahead and Premier League connotations as well. Q School starts this week. Pieman will have everything covered there. The Masters. Pieman, first initial thoughts, highlights, lowlights. Let us know.
Yeah, cheers, Adam. Well, it was a cracking tournament. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Watched pretty much every minute of it. I think I saw every dart thrown. So that's a good personal achievement for myself there. Not many people would have called the Jonny Clayton Mervyn King final. I think Jonny Clayton perfectly typified by our video that we did previewing the Darts Fantasy Masters game with Zweila, where Jonny Clayton was actually the cheapest player of the 24-man field, and he's won it. So we did say that this is a tournament that is prone to upsets with the short formats and the quality of the field, and that proved. And for me, a big takeaway would just be that when this rocks around again next year, I'm not going to be frightened to take people at the bottom end of the market, because I think you catch a lot of players cold. They've had this 3 or 4 week break after the Worlds, obviously a little bit longer than usual this time around. And I don't know, I noticed that Peter Wright made some comments in one of his interviews that really interested me, where he kind of said, I wish some of the big boys would take this tournament a bit more seriously. And I don't know who he was getting at through that. Obviously, I know Van Gerwen went out early. I could touch on that in a minute. And I'm not sure if he had anyone particularly in mind for that. But clearly there is a feeling that some players aren't taking it seriously as they maybe would with other events. We know it's an unranked event. Maybe the PDC could look at making it a ranked event and putting them ranking points on the line. Maybe they could extend it to the top 32 so that we had a more familiar format. I don't know whether it's the fact that some players are getting buys or what have you. I know from a viewing perspective, I really enjoy the tournament. But if there is a feeling amongst the players that some people aren't taking it seriously, then maybe it's something the PDC need to have a look at, because we want to see the best players putting their all into it. Maybe the prize money needs to go up or something like that. I don't know. But in terms of players that impressed me, well, probably start with the finalists. Jonny Clayton, I thought, was a very worthy winner. Averaged, well, I've got his averages here in front of me. 102, 98, 105, 104, 104. I mean, you couldn't knock it, really, could you? The only time he averaged under a ton was when he beat Michael van Gerwen, 10-9. So, I mean, yeah, it's hard to knock him at all. It was a flawless performance to beat Jose van Gerwen, Wade, Wright, King. It's not exactly an easy route through either. So, credit to him. And he's obviously snatched that Premier League spot now, which was a little bit surprising that they were just going to give it to whoever won. They obviously announced that just before the final, and I don't think the players were aware at the time. But Jonny gets that spot now. I think you can't really have any complaints. They seem to be going with a win and you're in attitude for these big tournaments, So at least kind of everyone knows where they stand now. I saw James Wade make a few comments saying that he thought he'd done more than enough this year to get through. He said that he'd been to 2 finals and a semi-final on TV, and he thought that was enough compared to the rest of the field. But, I mean, he was beaten by Jonny Clayton, 10-9, and that was arguably the game of the tournament. They both averaged 105. So maybe if Wade had won that leg, he would have been in. But we'll never know, I suppose. Mervyn King, losing finalist. I know Ozzy put him up at 50-1. I was also very keen on the 50-1, and he duly delivered a great run. I just felt like he didn't quite turn up to the standard he had been in the final. I felt like he was hanging on to Jonny Clayton, even though he got the first break and actually was like 5-3 up. You felt like he'd really kind of had to dig in just to get into that position. And then I think Clayton reeled off 5 or 6 legs in a row and quickly kind of put it to bed. I think he'll have a few regrets, Merv, there. He shouldn't do. He had a great tournament, and he's continuing the impressive form that we've seen for a few months now. But it's a case of what could have been. I mean, that's another TV final in his career that he's lost. I think he's lost all 6 or 7 of them now. Yeah, so that's bound to be a monkey on the back. But the thing is, if he keeps playing like this, he'll get more opportunities. He's playing as well as anyone at the moment. And just to reference Peter Wright again, coming into the semi-finals, himself and Gerwen Price were obviously right at the top of that market, with Clayton and King considered outsiders in both affairs. And Peter Wright said, I think Mervyn King's the man to beat on form. He's the man that we all recognise in the back room is playing the best darts. So that tells you a lot, when the other players also fear him, and he seems in a really good place mentally. Yes, it was a bit disappointing in the final, but another man that I'd be very keen on in the coming weeks and months, if his price continues to be as big as what it is. I know we've took some 150 on him for the Worlds next year. I think that's all gone now. So yeah, I was impressed with him. And then I guess if I was just to pick out a couple of runners elsewhere that didn't quite get there, James Wade, I thought he was really unlucky. That game with Clayton was fantastic. He'd have beaten anyone else, and he had fire in the belly to try and get that Premier League place, but couldn't quite get over the line, and he lost nothing in defeat. And Adrian Lewis, I thought Adrian Lewis, belied all expectations of him. We said we couldn't trust him to turn up, but he won a really good tight game with Michael Smith, and then he dumped out Gary Anderson the next day, obviously losing to Gerwen Price, where he didn't really turn up, but just a few signs that Eddie might be getting back. I liked what he was saying in his interviews about people keep writing him off, and he's quietly confident that this year will be the year he turns it around and stuff, but he's got to go and do it now. So someone I'll definitely be keeping an eye on, Adrian Lewis. But they're my thoughts. I'll maybe let someone else speak for a little bit. Ozzy, I don't know if you want to chime in with any insight.
Yeah, echo a lot of what you said, really. You've got to praise both Mervyn King and Jonny Clayton. I think an interesting stat is that excluding the final, Jonny Clayton won each of his games by a single leg, whether that be 6-5, 10-9, 11-10, and then he gets to the final, and I thought it was a convincing winner against Mervyn King, to be honest. I think King admitted in an interview he was falling asleep. And it was a late final. I think it's about 10:30, 10 o'clock, wasn't it, when it was being wrapped up? So, look, it's one of them. I think Merv will look back, and Bar Clayton was clearly, the standout performer of the tournament, and looks back as if a what if. But he shouldn't be deterred by that at all. He's probably in arguably the form of his life again. I think the fact that his fellow darters are recognising that as well will obviously boost his confidence. And Merv will go into every tournament with nothing to lose and absolutely everything to gain. Obviously, a lot of the ranking, people defending money and things like that is up for grabs this year. Rob Cross, a notable one. And I think there's going to be some big changes in the rankings. And look, Merv's ranked number 20 in the world at the moment. The way he's throwing, he's a top 16, top 10 player quite comfortably. I agree on A.D. Lewis. I mean, we criticised him pre-tournament, saying he just doesn't look interested without the crowd, but he completely showed us up there, putting 2 really good performances against Gary Anderson and Michael Smith. Don't think he was horrendous against Gerwen Price. I know Price got beat in the semi-final, but I thought Gerwen Price looked really good, and he's clearly in decent nick as well. But more losers of the tournament. I think it's easy to say that Rob Cross, again, he's the most false number 4 I've ever seen at the moment. It's truly shambolic from Rob Cross, the way he's throwing at the moment. And then another one, Jeffrey Deswan, again, he's on a downward slope that isn't stopping whatsoever. So I think we're certainly going to see, people moving around. Glenn Durrant, another one, after such a positive, first 18 months on the tour. Since he's battled COVID, he's really struggling now. And he was destroyed by Mervyn King in that first round. And we said it. We picked Mervyn King looking purely at his run, that he definitely had the beating of Durrant, 100% Rob Cross. And then you're fighting, he could be coming up against the likes of either Suljovic, Aspinall, and Ian White. Again, Merv's flying, has got the beating, and that's, so we kind of mapped, the route to the semi, and that paid off. One disappointment, and it's typical, we all backed him up, Dimitri Vandenberg. I think Smido said it the best in the chat. the worst TV performance in probably the past 2 years from Vandenberg. But you said it right, Pieman. These straight first round, straight to 6 legs. If you get off to a slow start, you will get beat.
Yeah, they fill me with nerves, these first to 6 games. You know, like even if you really fancy someone, they've still got to get through, haven't they? And it's just you see it in a lot of sports sometimes where even if you really fancy someone to have a big run, they've got to get in and get settled. You know, like the early part of tournaments are so dangerous because of the short format and the expectation as well. Like once these better players settle in and go over a longer format, then obviously the odds of an upset greatly reduce. And again, I think Michael van Gerwen, you know, like if you were playing set play, he grew into that match. Clayton got a very quick start. I think he was 4-1 up, and it ended up being 10-9. And fair play to Clayton, he went off 180 in the deciding leg. I mean, you know, there's nothing he could do with Van Gerwen, but Van Gerwen had 4 3-figure checkouts in that game. So it wasn't that he was badly struggling. The scoring was off. It was a slow start, but I did kind of touch on it briefly. He is trying some new darts. Now, I've seen varying opinions on social media about this. Some people saying, look, he's been practicing with these darts for 2 or 3 months now. Can't be an excuse. But, you know, it's bound to be different going on the stage using a different set than you've used for years and years. So I think we do have to allow him a little bit of leeway, and I expect to see his performances improve as the season goes on. Just want to touch on Nathan Aspinall as well as someone else who's using new equipment, and he openly spoke about it quite openly after beating Mensur Suljovic, a game where Suljovic missed 5 match darts. And Aspinall said, I'm using these new darts. In practice, I'm playing better than I ever have. But for some reason on the stage, it didn't quite feel right. And he said, if Suljovic had hit one of those match darts, I probably would have sacked off these new darts. But because I've got that win, I'm going to try and keep going with them. He then found himself 9-0 down to Mervyn King in the next game. So it'd be very interesting to see where Nathan Aspinall goes with these new darts and whether he sticks to them. I'll be keeping an eye on his interviews to see whether he, reverts back to type or whatever, because he's been struggling for a little while now, Aspinall. And let's remember as well, he's another player defending a lot of money from 2 years ago. He's another player that needs a big season, and he knows it as well. He's a nice bloke, and I hope he does turn it round.
Well, talking about darts tinkering, Peter Wright, I thought he was played really, really well. He's done very little wrong. He's lost on, by 1 leg to Clayton. I thought he looked a lot better than the Worlds. That is for sure to my eye. And, we've been critics of him, particularly from a betting point of view, because you literally do not know what equipment he's going to be throwing on the day. I mean, it's pinch of salt stuff in Peter Wright's interviews, as we know, similar to Gary Anderson. But he did say apparently that he'd forgot the darts he intended to play with. Apparently, so but yeah, I thought Peter Wright looked pretty good. And I thought that Gerwen Price continued his form. Obviously, is number 1 and won at the Worlds. But to be honest, with Van Gerwen still not at it, and don't know which way he's going to turn with the equipment. There's a little gap really could be forming between Price and Van Gerwen. And I said, when is it going to be? And I think it should be from now, when Gerwen Price starts going off favourites for these tournaments. Outright favourite above Van Gerwen. There was nearly the same price. It was about 5-2 Van Gerwen, 11-4 Price. So it's already very close. But I think from now onwards, and the next major is the UK Open in about a month's time, Gerwen Price, it deserves to be and should be the favourite for these tournaments. But Van Gerwen's been number 1 for 7 years until a few weeks ago, and it would be safe to say that every single tournament in that time, Van Gerwen has gone off favourite. Incredible, really, when you think about that. But I think that the time is approaching where Gerwen Price should be and deserves to be the betting favourite. Like I say, I thought Peter Wright played well. Aspinall disappointing. To be honest, we all targeted that section of the draw, as Ozzy perfectly described in regards to King. I took a similar approach on Aspinall, and it was the wrong one. King obviously had the better of their game. And Clayton, the winner. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Ferret. I don't often back him, to be honest, but I'm a massive fan of him. Unassuming, hard-working. Gets no theatrics really. Very likable character. And as Pieman said, to average 104 in 3 games, 105 in 1, and then 97 and beating Van Gerwen. There is absolutely no question that he deserved to win this tournament, and fair play to him. I like what they did with the Premier League. Obviously, they couldn't say the winner of this will be in the Premier League, because the odds were that one of the already 7 participants or 9 participants in the Premier League were going to win it anyway. So they could only make that decision quite late. I watched a Barry Hearn interview yesterday, and he said they were basically on WhatsApp as the day was going on. And when it came that there was going to be 2 non-Premier League players in the final, then they decided on it then. I think that's perfectly fine. He's said it's not going to be delayed too much, the Premier League, because he doesn't want to knock into the summer schedule. So they might just have to swallow the fact that part of the Premier League is going to be behind closed doors, particularly to start with, and they don't want to knock on to the rest of the season. What else was I thinking? I thought Gurney played well and was a tad unlucky not to beat Chisnall. That went down to a final leg. So he's probably one to look on. Future Vandenberg, I mean, you could hardly make it up how bad he was compared to what he's been doing recently. So yeah, hopefully we might get a price about Vandenberg next time. I don't think we should give up on him just off that. And we did a video on Friday, Pieman late, and I know that we mentioned Jose de Souza. He's played well. He's averaged 101 and lost in the deciding leg. But my opinion on de Souza changes virtually every tournament I see him, to be honest.
I think you can give Jose a wide berth. I think there's enough players in form to kind of leave him for a little bit. And he's one of those, he might pop a run together at a big price and you think, a bit of an afterthought, oh, maybe I should have seen that. But yeah, I definitely think there's enough reason and enough informed players to give him a miss for a little while. Simon Whitlock probably deserves a mention. He played extremely well against Ratajski, and then the highest average of the tournament in defeat, I think, 106 to Peter Wright. So, I mean, he's another one that came out of it none the worse despite his loss. And Michael Smith lost that last leg decided to Adrian Lewis, played very well.
It 2 170s in the same match. But
yeah, he hit 170, 170, 152 and maybe a 136 as well. Yeah, I mean, the finishing just ridiculous. But there's a lot of players, and we can maybe do a video on this, a separate video about, players who are maybe going to be slightly under the radar with their prices, but look in decent form.
Go on, Oz.
Well, I was just going to touch, actually, moving on to the Premier League, and I'm just looking at it now, and it's hard to look at, but I say one of the worst lineups, because clearly it's not, but it's certainly much changed from what it was. Jonny Clayton, Jose de Souza. Don't think Vandenberg's been in it before. He's either had 1 go, or I don't think he's been in it at all.
His debut, yeah.
He's been a challenger, has he
There've
not?
been contenders, a few of them, yeah.
Yeah. And bar like Rob Cross, you can write him off. I mean, unless he has a complete rebound, Rob Cross is staring at elimination already. Glenn Durrant as well, the defending champion. But you can't make an argument for these players. So, I mean, I've not seen any Premier League prices yet at the moment, but it's hard to write off the likes of Gerwen, Price, Peter Wright already. But then Jonny Clayton, I'm not saying he'll come in and win it, and quite often we've seen that new players don't always take like a duck to water to the Premier League. Gerwen, Price, I think, won 1 game in his first time in the Premier League. It was horrendous. But Jonny Clayton has proved in this format, which the Masters is quite similar to the Premier League, short shootout, and he was great in it. He was excellent. And he proved the year before, Jonny Clayton, that he can perform at this level again in the shorter formats. I'm not saying he'll go and win, but he's certainly got a style of game from where he could potentially impress. And I'd be interested to see his price.
Certainly. I'll give you a rundown.
I think he's about 28 or 33 when I looked. But can I just say one thing while I remember it on Jonny Clayton in the Premier League? I do agree with you. I think he's a very interesting runner because normally the big pressure on new Premier League entrants is, will they handle the crowds? Will they handle the week-on-week relentless pressure and stuff? Now, if we're going to potentially be looking at part of the Premier League without crowds and stuff, then you're looking more at an event like that was the Masters. Yeah. And Clayton looks as in form as anyone. So I think a change in the format or, a lack of crowds would favour Jonny Clayton's chances.
Absolutely. And you've got to look at it as well, just solely on form. Nathan Aspinall, playing around with darts, hasn't got a pair that he likes. Vandenberg, I certainly think, is in the running. He's had 1 bad game that's the first time in a long time. So I think he's like Jose de Souza, as you've both mentioned. He played well, but again, he finds ways to get beat at the moment. Yeah. And you've not got you don't have that time in such a short format. Glenn Durrant, no form. Gary Anderson, bit of a coin flip again, isn't he? Again, do you know what Gary... I mean, he said Gary Anderson, he didn't even try for the Worlds, got to a final, and 2021 is going to be his year. He's going to train with Ryan Searle, hit the board as hard as ever. It's a really interesting lineup, and I think if they go with the start date of what they usually do, you've got players going into it completely out of form, and players like Jonny Clayton, Vandenberg, we'll be looking to take advantage of that, and by no time, they've got over the initial, I might get relegated, and then they'll be pushing for those, I think, what is it, where the elimination night, the safe in that, and then they're pushing towards the playoffs.
I'll give you a quick run through of the odds. Now, Clayton isn't showing on Odds Checker as yet, but I think Pieman may have spotted him elsewhere at 25.
I'm fairly confident he's in at 28.
We've got Van Gerwen 5-2, best price. Gerwen price 3-1. Peter Wright 6. Vandenberg 10. Anderson 14. Jose 18. Glenn 20. Aspinall 22. And Rob Cross 50-1. The outsider probably should be 150-1. Just before we wrap up, Pieman, any other business? I think Q School is underway this week. I know you've got all bases covered there, and potentially a couple of bets that you can highlight to the followers.
Yeah, Q School starting next week. It's obviously 2 events, one in Europe and one in the UK. Various, the cards are, it's a little bit complex for this video. We have done a video explaining it in more detail, but there's 29 cards up for grabs. They're going to go pro rata across with more to the UK because there's more entrants in the UK. But it's interesting in Q School. Sky Bet have quite admirably tried to price up every runner, which I can only imagine has been a tough task for some of these players who are basically, Joe Blogs from the pub and stuff. But, it's quite nice that people can have a fiver on their mates at 200-1 and stuff to rock up and get a card. And we have seen it happen before, a couple of unlikely winners of cards, but standard looks ridiculously good this year. I've got a couple of selections that have taken my eye. I'm not sure if they're still the price that they were, but Justin van Tergouw is someone I'm very interested in. Young Dutchman, it was a youth champion, won a televised BDO youth final a few years ago. A few of you might remember that game. If you don't get it on YouTube, you'll soon remember it because it was a very memorable performance. He was actually putting in averages bigger than a lot of the BDO players, to be honest. And he was a kid. And, it looked a case of, this guy could, storm the world of darts in time. He's actually had problems with injuries to his wrist and other bits and pieces. But from what I can sort of deduce from having a look around, he seems to have got over that now. He's been practicing hard. Obviously, he's going to the European Q School. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be a lesser standard necessarily. There's still some very good players going for those cards. But you look at the top of the betting in that European Q School, Raymond van Barneveld is massive odds on. Well, he was massive odds on. I think he's a bit shorter now. But Van Barneveld is the creme de la creme. We don't know anything about Van Barneveld. We don't know how he's playing. There's no guarantees he's going to rock up and get this tour card. Now, I think people are looking at it a bit nostalgically, thinking, Barney, he should beat all of these. Well, let's not forget, when Barney had his 1-year retirement tour, he was abject for most of the year. He was routinely knocked out in the first round of stuff. So he needs to be completely back towards his best to get a card here, I think. There's some interesting runners throughout, but yeah, Van Tergouw is definitely someone I'll be keeping an eye on. I think he was 13-2 to get a card. I don't know if he's
7-1 best price.
There you go, 7-1. I couldn't put anyone off that. And Franz Roetzsch is another man, the German. I'm not sure if you've got a price on him.
11-2. There's a massive disparity there. Sky Bet 2, Paddy 11-2, and Hills 7-2. Big disparity.
There you go. I'm not taking any claim for that, but Sky were 6. So, Franz Roetzsch, anyway. Just a quick line on him. He played at the International Darts Open in October, produced some very good performances, knocked out Rob Cross. Cross actually played pretty well in that game, to be honest, summed up his year, really. Even when he played well, he lost. And then he took Ratajski to a last leg decider. All of this footage available on YouTube for anyone who wants to do a bit of research. But this lad can play, and the digging around I've done on his stats suggests that price is perhaps a little too big for his prospects. So obviously you're going to need some luck, but you're looking at obviously players to reach the final on that day will get a card. Players to win the day get a card. But really, if you're looking to have an interest, I think you've got to be looking for players who are consistently going to be good enough to accumulate points across the 4 days. And then, their cream should rise to the top in that if they have 4 good days of quality darts, even if they have a first round exit, they could still get a card. And I think Roetzsch and Van Tergouw, if they play up to their ability, are probably some of the most talented players in that European Q School. Don't know if Ozzy's got anything to add.
Ozzy's got a couple of selections as well, I believe. I'll give you the prices as you speak, Oz.
Yeah, so I can only advise people trying to back against odds on select. So like Van Barneveld is 4 to 6, I think. Danny Baggish odds on. The good players, but they're coming in at the start. This is a new format this year as well. And if you look at previous Q schools, the amount of players that you think, oh, he'll do well, they fall at the first hurdle. Prime example from last year, a bit different, but Fallon Sherrock. She was odds on. Look what she did at the Worlds. Got nowhere near winning a tour card, and it's because it's completely different. I'm looking at some bigger prices. One that he's been there and thereabouts for a while is Andrew Gilding. A while ago was fairly
Goldfinger.
I like him.
Yeah, knows what he's doing, knows his game. But the key thing is he's entering at the final stages, so he's missing out. All the potential ones that could have a game of their life. He's missing all of that, and he's going to be coming up. He's going to be knowing who he's coming up against. I don't know what price Gilding's at actually.
7 to 2, the Gilding. 7 to 2. Yeah.
I'll take that for somebody who's going to be entering at the final stages all the time. A blast from the past is Wes Newton. Now I know Newton. Former Premier League player, good player. Was certainly in the latter stages of major finals as well, major tournaments. Story. I think he's at 10 to 1, Wes Newton.
Well, he's as short as 2 to 1, but as big as 10 to 1. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, now I know he's coming in at the start, and it all depends on what he's turning up. But he's been doing, I think, some like the WDF events online type of stuff, and he's been averaging in the mid 90s. Which, if you can average in the mid 90s at Q School, you're not going to be far off. And he wasn't far off last year. I think he only missed out by a point or two. So he knows the format. He's shown he can compete. And I think at 10 to 1 for a player of his calibre is certainly interesting. Alan Norris, another one at 12s. Again, not as high on Alan Norris. I don't really know what he's been doing. But then in the European category, one that sticks out is former BDO champion Christian Kist. Now, only fell off the tour due to injury. And he only just missed out on his retaining his card. So while he was throwing or not competing with bad injuries, I think he has bad gout. He's spoken to Michael van Gerwen about it, who also has bad gout. Must be something in the Dutch.
Yeah.
But he claims to have got it sorted. He's practicing 4 or 5 hours a day. Clearly, it's not bothering him. So I've got to take, a former world champion. It's not as if, he's an over-the-hill champion either. Kist is fairly young. And again, he's aggressive, scores big. And I remember where he battered everybody when he won that BDO tournament a while back. So again, I think somebody at 10 to 1 coming into that European, which is certainly not as strong as the UK side. Absolutely not. And I'm surprised Danny Baggish as actually, I know there's more, more cards available, but Baggish, who coming from America has the choice of both, has decided to go into the UK version rather than European version. One other shout, Kevin Painter, another blast from the past, but if he's on form, the artist.
Ozzy's going to have this Premier League lineup back from 2010, isn't he?
Yeah,
if there was a Veterans Tour, Ozzy would be all over it.
Do you know what? I read something a little while ago, Barry Hearn talking about whether there was potential for a PDC Veterans Tour, and I was just thinking, God, I'd love to watch that.
There is, I tell you, people would watch it.
Yeah.
People would. Can you imagine Roland Shelton coming back out?
Colin Lloyd.
Yeah, Colin Lloyd.
Cole Stompy.
Yeah, Cole Stompy. Peter Manley. Dart. There'd be interest.
Would be interest.
You get people like Rod Harrington back on stage as well doing it. It would be interesting.
Right.
I tell you.
Right, we're just approaching half an hour, so we'll wrap up there. Before we go down the road of nostalgia.
please let me get one word in on Q School, and it's a word of warning. Obviously, travel restrictions. Please make sure if you're having a look at players that are coming from the Americas, Canada, Australia. I know the likes of Sego Asada and stuff haven't been able to get over for it, so make sure you do your research before you jump into this.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's an update on the Masters and a bit of Premier League talk and Q School selections as well. Thanks for tuning in. We'll speak soon.
Cheers.